Welcome to the first video in a series of videos devoted to the topic of presentation and writing tips. And in this first video we will talk about some overall principles. So we won't go into details, but talk about the bigger scheme of things. And as with the other videos, this is part of the teaching material of ISP Group. It's free to use for anyone who wants to use it. And as is clear from this title, this is part of the more general skill-based issues that is part of the general CDIO concept. And in the course where this belongs, this is still a very early lecture. It's the first video that is that is talking about these kind of things. So, just a little selling point why I think that this is so important a topic. So if you have a good presentation, you can, or if you have a bad presentation, you can spoil a good message. You can if you have a good presentation, you can save a quasi-failed project, make it look fairly good. And perhaps most importantly, if you have a good project, you can make it into an outstanding project, which will make you stick out apart from all others. So the wrapping, the sort of way you come across is, I would say, 50% presentation and 50% content. So it's really important, and with that in mind, I think in general educations we spend far too little time learning about presentations. Yes. So the second argument I have on why spend time on this is actually that this is not only to give a good impression on a specific project, but at least for me personally, these principles that I will talk about now in this video, they are actually the same principles that I personally use to judge a person. If it is a sort of intelligent, sharp person, if it's a person that is clear-minded and easy to talk to and easy to work with, these are the principles. It's the same principles to really think about these things and train these kind of principles is really going to help you a lot in many different types of situations in life. So, the four most important principles, the ones that I will talk about now, are principles that apply across the spectrum of all types of presentations. Oral presentations, poster presentations, written documents of various forms. And four principles. The first: adapt the message to who you are talking to. Yes. The second: be really clear about what is the key message and how is all the material, all the words, all the sentences, all the material that you're presenting, how is that structured in relation to this key message, the main message that you're giving. Third, adapt the message to the current format. So there are many ways of saying the same thing, and we will talk quite a lot in the coming videos about this. And the fourth principle, which is maybe the most tricky and subtle and elusive principle, it has to do with keeping and catching the attention, or catching and keeping the attention of the audience, making the presentation come alive. So now let's go through relatively quickly in the first round these four principles, and that will be the end of this first video. So the first: adopt the message to who you are talking to. And this question of who you are talking to, it is actually multifaceted. One sort of parameter that you want to look at is if it's a person who knows a lot about this field from the beginning, or if he knows basically nothing, or somewhere in between. Another parameter is if this is a friend, or if it's a stranger, or if it's somebody that is there to evaluate you or to help you, or so what is your relationship to this person? And I think in all of this, the maybe most important thing when you're thinking about who you're presenting it to is to not use words and bits of information in a casual way that the other person does not know from beforehand, that the other person does not understand. So it's of course allowed to use words that the person does not understand, but then you have to present these words. And it's of course possible to say things that the person doesn't know from beforehand. That's usually part of why you are delivering a message. But then you have to explain them. So you can't use words that the person doesn't know to explain another word that the person doesn't know. And this is really a common thing, to not think about exactly what is the person that you're presenting to knowing from beforehand. And here comes a little question. This video is part of the preparations to do a bachelor's project. And if you do a bachelor's project or a master's project, what is your audience? Who are you presenting to? Well, you are presenting or writing for a classmate. So somebody who is taking the same education as you, but who has worked with another project or maybe even another specialization within the education. So this is your audience. This is who you are presenting to. So, second topic, have a clear message and structure. So here I think it's a really useful exercise to force yourself to formulate in one sentence, what do you want to say? In one sentence. This is really useful exercise. And then once you have that, try to relate how to get to understanding and being convinced that this one sentence is accurate. So what is the logical path through all the different things that you are presenting that leads you to this one message? So this is basically here. So if you do these things, you will always know where you are now on the path and where you're going. So the listener should always know, why am I hearing this thing that I'm reading right now? And where should I insert this piece of knowledge in the logical structure of pieces of information that I'm being presented, that I'm being showered over with? So as a listener, you're getting lots of pieces of information and you need to help that the listener structure these. So this is really, really essential to get the message across. So let's have a look at this in a tree structure. And we will use this tree structure in many of the upcoming videos. So you have some kind of current message, and now just in this first presentation, let's take the message that we have now, that structure is important. Let's do a little exercise where we have 2 arguments for this. In reality, I've already given you quite a few, but let's just consider 2 more arguments. So structure is important, there are 2 arguments. And then once you say structure is important, you say there are 2 arguments. And then the listener will automatically make space in his mind, in her mind, for 2 arguments. And then you have to come with 2 arguments. And then if you say the first argument is, then the listener will go in his mind to the space in his mind where there is already a space for the first argument. And the first argument here is that it's easier to remember. So if you're doing an oral presentation, it's easier to remember the stuff if you have a clear structure. That's the first argument. And then you might say, well, there are some counter arguments to this. So for instance, if you should remember all the stuff and the structure, it's actually more things to remember. It's more work and it's more things to remember. So it's not easier to remember. But then that's not really true, because there is a counter argument to the counter argument. So counter argument. And that is that if you have a good structure, it is in some sense more things to remember, but the things fit much better. So the sort of logical units that you need to remember are fewer. So the structure makes the sort of amount of time it takes to grasp the material shorter. So if you really know what you're talking about, having a structure is not an extra burden. It's really something that will help you. So now we see that we are at the end here. So then we go in the tree structure back to where? To the second argument. So there were two arguments. Let's look at the second argument. And the second argument here is that it's easier to understand. So if you're listening, this I already talked about. So it's easier to understand. So I won't give any substructure now for this one. So now we had two arguments. Easier to remember, easier to understand, which both argue that structure is important. So now, where do we go? Well, now we do a bridge to the next message. And now, if you've been paying attention, you already know what the next message will be. So what is it? The next message is that you should adopt it to the current format. So you remember that it's important. It was the second principle of the four principles. So now we are moving to the next and third principle. So adopt the message to the current format. So there are many different types of formats. There are many different types of ways of presenting. There is oral presentation and written presentation, poster presentation and customer meetings. And all of these you will encounter in the project course. But actually also these subdivide in subtypes. So thesis presentation, papers, reviews, grant application, popular science summaries. And you all send emails and you write text messages, and you know that these are not the same. You don't write in the same way here. You just write very short. And the same for orals. There are also different types of orals. For instance, there is a big difference between teaching and giving a scientific presentation. And you in your education has mostly been exposed to teaching lectures, and you're not supposed to do such an oral presentation. You are supposed to do a scientific lecture. So it's good already now to think about that these are two different things. And generally, it's really important to know that all of these formats have their own rules, and what is good in one format may actually be completely forbidden in another format. So for instance, if you're doing an oral presentation in front of an audience, doing a joke once in a while, if it's a good joke and the audience starts to laugh, then that's perfectly fine. That's actually a good thing, because it makes the audience wake up, and it makes the audience listen to you. But to have a joke, or even to just have irony in a thesis or in a scientific paper, it's basically a complete no-no. It's completely forbidden. It's something you basically never do. So what is good in one thing may actually be completely forbidden in another. So you really need to think about what is the format. So, final principle, catch and keep the attention of the audience. And this is, of course, where difficult personal things like personality and your charisma and your way of connecting with your audience comes in. But there are some good tricks. And one of them is to catch the attention immediately, because if you don't have it to start with, usually you're lost. So if you catch it immediately, at least you have a chance. And then how do you keep it? Well, one way to keep it is by focusing on the logical structure, which I already said. This is one thing, but then there are of course also many other things, and I will talk about several of those as well in the upcoming videos. But the basic principle is here you can basically be creative, do something that is unique, do something that makes you stand out, but without doing things that are sort of outside the rules, so to say, of your format that you're presenting in. So these have been the 4 basic principles that I want to start out with this in this first video. And now in the coming videos we will have a look at more details, different specific formats, and different more specific topics.